morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to i4Travel's most recent webinar titled Master the Personalized Future of Travel to Win Loyalty. Now, without a doubt, competition for customers has never been higher. The market is saturated on the supply side with intermediaries, alternative lodging providers, traditional players, and new disruptors completely. On the demand side, discretionary spending is high, times are relatively good in the business cycle, and people are booking flights, hotels, tours, and cars very regularly. So within this whirlwind of competition, how do you have a hope of differentiating yourselves? As you probably guessed it, it's increasingly coming down to personalization, and we are now blessed with larger volumes of data, more relevant data, and the machine learning software that recognizes narrow patterns, allowing us to personalize at scale. New research coming in by Epsilon has indicated that 80% of customers are more likely to make a purchase when brands offer personalized experiences. So what this tells us is there's huge opportunities for growth and revenue generation from personalization. However, in a personalization webinar conducted by Segment, it was found on average 71% of consumers feel frustrated when their shopping experience is impersonal. So there's also a worrisome aspect to not having personalization and the possibility of completely losing money and eventually hemorrhaging revenues. So let's get down to business in this discussion. We have an illustrious panel of marketing, revenue, and digital specialists on board today. We are joined by Michael Marino, the Chief Experience Officer and Senior Vice President of Marketing from Caesars Entertainment. We are joined also by Claudia Infante, the Vice President of Revenue Strategy from Margaritaville. And also on the panel, we are joined by Dan Christian, who is the Global Chief Digital Officer of the Travel Corporation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the panel.
Thanks so much, Leo. Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely, and fantastic to have you all on board as well. So let's launch right into the first question. I'm actually going to start with you, Michael. So let's start really a sort of in the most basic way possible. You know, how have your personalization efforts evolved over the years with Caesars Entertainment?
Yeah, thanks, Leo. So we were really early to the personalization game with our core customers. So we started a loyalty program, Total Rewards at the time, 20 years ago, and we got very good information from our guests on what they would spend with us, and their spend patterns, what they were interested in. We were very early to collect that information, and so we made a lot of decisions with near perfect information on what a customer would do when they visited our properties. We were able to provide our guests with personalized offers that could be, in the form of incentives to get them to come visit us again, whether it was show tickets, restaurants, hotel rooms, you name it. We were able to put packages together that fit the needs of our guests because we had a really good understanding of what that guest would do when they made the trip. Life has changed a lot now, and our business is not 90% gambling like it used to be, and so how it's evolved is we've really had to make decisions without that perfect information. And so we've had to use other sources to try to get, we call it signals, and just, leads and signals of what a guest is willing to do, or who's high value, medium value, low value, who's willing to buy Caesars versus the Flamingo versus Planet Hollywood as an example, and try to route guests to the right place based on the limited information that we have about them. It's become much more digital and less about return visitation, but more about trying to find new guests through, again, the signals that they send us. Very different approach.
Interesting. So a lot of the energies now, you're saying they're less about retention, and with your personalization efforts, more about acquisition of new?
We believe in right? It's not substitution. It's more the team that used to focus on retention still focuses on retention. There's a new team now that's focusing on acquisition, and it's a different customer base that they're focusing on that we never had to focus on in the past. So I think it's just the way we're evolving is adding on to our toolkit as opposed to replacing one with the other.
Interesting. Great. Well, I'll shift the conversation a little bit more to be about data. And I wanted to ask yourself, Claudia, what are the different data points use for personalization in your strategy at Margaritaville?
Well, unlike probably the other panelists, Margaritaville is a brand that is much more expanded, not only on the hospitality side and the restaurant side, but also on consumer goods. So we have different divisions of the business that not only drive people to the hotels and the restaurants, but also buy things online. We have a full online store. We also have a division of beverages, so we have a beer and a collection of spirits and liquors and mixers and things of other kinds. So our products are not just on the hospitality side. Therefore, the data that we have is a little more scattered. So some of the data points may not necessarily refer to stays or spend while they're on location, but also people who buy, beer in the supermarket or tequilas or rums or T-shirts online. So our data points really are a little more scattered than just the stay or even the guest behavior side. So the data points that we used are varied across the different business verticals that we have.
And is there any kind of hierarchy there, Claudia? I mean, are some of the data points much more valuable than others in terms of revenue generation?
Yeah, we don't call it a hierarchy. We call those relevancy. So one of the things that we have in our systems right now that we track in terms of guest engagement is obviously the recency, the frequency, and the monetary value of each transaction. But we also have a second or a fourth dimension that we look into, and it's relevancy. So how relevant is the purchase of a package of beer or frozen shrimp next to the purchase of a bicycle or a margarita maker or even a hotel stay? Those they carry different values or different scores, if you would, of relevancy, and they get calculated in the guest value that way.
Understood. Okay. Interesting. Well, I wanted to give down the question which relates to cross-selling. So obviously at the Travel Corporation, there are over 25 brands. So how do you cross-market to your audience? And if so, how do you achieve that?
Yeah, thanks, Leo, and great to speak to everyone. Travel Corporation is a family-owned business with, say, more than 25 brands, and each of those brands have been individually successful over the last 20, 30, even 50 years. And the opportunity that we have now is actually to leverage the power of the collection and encourage people to book cross-brand activity, something that wasn't previously done. And so it's an exciting opportunity for us to connect travelers who love river cruising with African safaris to taking a guided tour of Europe. And so what we essentially do is message returning guests after they've come back from a trip and present the family of brands, the collection, and all the various opportunities. And we try and target them based on where they've traveled and what they might be interested in next. And since we've introduced that only 2 years ago, we've seen a massive increase in repeat guest bookings simply by virtue of the fact that many of our guests did not realize that each of these brands were part of the same family, and they could essentially ensure that they got a similar experience, value, and also a past guest discount that we can apply across brands.
Got it. So it's sort of really highlighting the fact that you are sort of one unit and one identity within all, that oversees all those brands and harnessing the upsell potential of that.
Exactly. And so it's interesting being on a call here with Margaritaville and Caesars and, talking about, these three different businesses and looking at, for us, it's the multi-day tour space, primarily tours and these guided vacations, which is a unique experience, and we're seeing a lot of growth and progress in this space. But the real opportunity for us is to connect the dots between the different brands. So previously they would compete against each other and they would encourage any of their guests to repeat within that one brand. And so there was a massive opportunity, as I'm sure you'd recognize, and everyone else here joining this webinar, to realize the opportunity for cross-brand selling. And so we are admittedly still in our fairly early days, despite the success that we are having in terms of how we now personalize and message based on, if this someone is a luxury traveler and wants to travel with Insight Vacations, Luxury Gold, or Uniworld, or if they're a youth budget traveler, they can travel with Kentucky or U River Cruises or Bus About. And if they're a family travel, they can travel with Trafalgar or Insight Vacations, and again with Uniworld on one of their Generations programs. So it's exciting for us to be able to segment those audience based on their travel style, and then be able to present relevant travel experiences that might be of the greatest interest to them.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very much about connecting the dots and understanding, where the customer would find the most value, and then selling that experience to them. But I mean, as we all know here today on the call, and all the listeners in will know, connecting the dots is always easier said than done. These days, it's also worth discussing a little bit the tools that allow us to basically connect those dots and make predictive decisions effectively. So, Michael, I wanted to ask you about how you use any tools, which tools you may use to assist you in your personalization efforts.
Yeah, thanks, Leo. So what Dan's team does, they create guided tours for their guests and sell them as a package. Effectively, that's what we're trying to do here. We sell the hotel first, and then try to layer on the rest of the guided tour for individuals, especially in Las Vegas with our 9 properties and many assets. And we've tried to do that through many different tools, but we use 2 major platforms now. We have a Salesforce partnership on the data side, really for our core customers. All of our data from our loyalty programs flow into the Salesforce platform. And then we use Adobe for anything digital at this point, talking to our guests. We use full suite of their products now, from content to how to test and target. So how we're able to change what the guest sees. And I'll go into a little bit more on that later. But our holy grail vision and what we want to do is, to be able to, the more we learn about what a guest does on their visit here, we want to curate the entire rest of that visit, and then every visit beyond that. I mean, we don't want to sell, if we realize that people, these are steak fans. We have many steakhouses. We want to put them to try to push them to different steakhouses. We realize that they're pop fans. We have many residencies of pop concerts. We want to show them what's available and try to drive them into those assets, because we know that our experiences. We know that our experiences are really great experiences that are memorable. And so the more things we can get people to do while they're here, it's kind of the inverse of most businesses. Most businesses, the more money people spend, the more upset they are. With us, the irony is that the more they engage in what we sell, the happier they are with the experience, and the higher they rate us, and the more likely they are to come back. It's actually a really good problem to have. So we just try to figure out how to guide them into those experiences. And if we could sell them as a package like Dan does, we would love to. Unfortunately, that's not how people buy Vegas. So, but we try to use those tools, and especially Adobe and Salesforce are our 2 big ones. Trying to use those tools to try to make the experience as fruitful as possible for those guests.
Fantastic, great. Claudia, what are the key components of the guest experience from a Margaritaville viewpoint that can be personalized? First of all, in the digital journey, and then secondly, during the guest stay.
Sure. So we have different, as I said, because we have different products and different consumers. Our customer journey may be wildly different for someone purchasing, a bicycle or a pair of shoes online versus someone who's coming to the property to spend a couple of days, or even someone going to the restaurant and having dinner with their family. So our guest journey really is split into on-site and digital. The digital piece is mostly driven by our CRM program. We are right now in the infancy stages of our loyalty program. It's not out there. It's not public yet. We are testing it with a very select group of consumers that we are engaging in different ways. So we're learning what are the things that our consumers value the most when it comes to the digital journey? Do they value more the personalization at the time of booking, or do they value suggestions based on like-minded individuals, or based on past purchases, right? So we're kind of following a little bit of the Amazon model and saying, hey, you like these products, you may like this other one, or you've purchased this one and 35 other people have selected this other one product as well. So we're testing that, and we're putting that personalization in the testing environment for our digital journey. On site, we capture preferences for our guests when they come to the resorts or to the hotels, and we keep them as part of the engagement positions that we have on each hotel. We have engagement ambassadors who basically spend time looking at what these guests have done while they're there, and contacting them prior to their arrival to ask them, what else can we do for you? How else can we personalize your stay? And what are the suggestions that we may have for you as you come and experience the hotel? Even though you may have been here before, we want to give you kind of the insider's tip. So there's different dimensions of the personalization journey, and a lot of it has to do also with the demographic that our customers fall into. As you may imagine, Margaritaville has a pretty mature audience. Our average consumer is about 54 to 65. So the digital journey is a little more tricky when you have customers that are more used to picking up the phone and calling or just being in there in person. So we have to kind of attack it in both ends.
Yeah, and I suppose it's about understanding the happy medium for your particular demographic when it comes to communications, and the key though does seem to be consistency throughout the entire customer journey.
Yeah, and it's difficult to achieve that consistency because the other problem that we have as a brand, and it's funny, Michael said it's a good problem to have, is we have a very high level of engagement with the people that are loyal to Margaritaville and understand what the brand is about. But we also have a very diverse customer base. So we have, a university program, for example, a college program where we have kids all over the United States in different colleges that are Margaritaville fans, and their experience and their journey is completely different than the adult retirees who are buying a home in Margaritaville. So for us, really, it's almost a game of balancing the act on both ends, but also trying to capture as much of the consumer preferences and the consumer behavior as we can every time they interact with us, so that we can then map it out and create models for our not only for our current guests, but obviously for our acquisition pieces, so both on the digital and on the personal side.
Excellent. No, fantastic. Well, I'll actually shift to Dan now and ask a pretty similar question. And really, it'd be good to know at the Travel Corporation how you personalize the experience, and within the experience, in particular, messaging, and what have the results been from these efforts over the years?
Well, great. Thanks, Leo. Well, it's really interesting to hear what Caesars has been doing at Margaritaville. Both Margaritaville, I was saying to the team, because I actually have I've been to the Fort Lauderdale location, and I'm a Jimmy Buffett fan. And so it's always interesting when we look at these businesses and understand how they're connecting with the consumer and creating that dedication, that loyalty, and building on the experience that people are having. And I think that's the one thing that's just important to know, is that to ensure that we are successful, and it starts with the operations side and the delivery of the product itself, or the actual travel experience. And so making sure that we're tying together the digital experience that enhances what the guest experience is on the trip, and then how we can market to them on their return in such a way that they are going to travel again with one of our brands or share it with one of their friends. And we knew that they were doing this already because, the focus being offering amazing travel experiences that people will encourage others to take and for them to come back to. That's like first and foremost, is that operational excellence across Travel Corporation and our brands. And then really the focus for us is leveraging that and amplifying that so that when they get back from their trip that we insert the right messaging at the right time, meaning the last thing you want to do when you get back from an amazing holiday is to get another email telling you to go on another holiday, because chances are you've spent all your money and you're focused on groceries and laundry, and it's like the last thing you possibly want, but it's the first thing a business would want, right? So I think the shift that we made is that making sure that we are truly consumer-centric and we are focusing on what is the right message to provide them at each stage. And even simple things, Leo, that have been really impactful. So beyond, we welcome our guests home, but we don't welcome our guests home and then put pressure on them to book their next holiday. We give them time to adjust, and we have a series of nurture communications that we send out afterwards that ultimately does lead to encouraging them to book their next trip. But we know that personal events, so when it's their birthday or any key milestones that we're aware of based on our CRM system, is that we will trigger messages so that we actually have more direct one-to-one connections with our guests. And then also we do anniversary messages around their trips, which I think everyone here on this call is addicted to their social media reminders of like where you were a year ago. And we've been doing that for quite a bit longer than that whole concept of just reminding people that this was the time they were on a holiday a year ago, and then setting off that journey again, because we know that the travel cycle is more like 18 months rather than 12 months. So again, it's not like we want to get them back next year. We want them a year from now to realize that, yes, this is the time to start planning my next holiday, my next vacation and getaway. And so I think those are a few of the techniques, if you will, that we've implemented that have been very successful for us. But it all comes back to being consumer-centric and making sure that you're just providing the right message at the right time that the customer ultimately is interested in hearing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, Dan. I think that the companies out there that have performed personalization most effectively and seen revenue growth from it have been the ones that have been able to have a grown-up and adult relationship with their customers' data. And customer centricity really doesn't stem from overselling, even if the offers are hyper-relevant. It comes from having a measured and good approach. And this is especially important in the travel industry if, say, for example, a family only has 15 or 20 days holiday a year.
And those days, as you say, are precious. And so I think that's where, just making sure that you do understand that essential need, that this is the third largest expense that someone's going to undertake after a house and a car is a holiday. And so that whole experience of purchasing a holiday has to have wow factor and reassurance, and then ultimately the delivery of the experience. And that's where, from a digital point of view, we can't afford to get that wrong, because we can't, the effort it takes to bring a customer in and to get their interest, we don't want to risk turning anyone away. And so the testing and trialing with messaging is incredibly important to make sure that we are hitting the mark, and getting feedback, most importantly, from our travelers as well, just to make sure that we are communicating in the way that we can read the data, you can understand the numbers and interpret them, but in terms of actually hearing back from them. So guest feedback is of paramount importance to us, and the FIFO reviews that we get back from each of our guests after a trip experience, and that is actually kind of one of the key elements that helps us improve the product, the online experience in all aspects, is being able to gather that feedback and make it meaningful to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that constant feedback and taking that on board to learn from your customers' past experiences that allows you to give them a better experience in the future and ultimately make yourself as a business more prosperous. So, Michael, when it comes to the customer journey, specifically at Caesars Entertainment, where do you think it's most important to personalize?
Yeah, you guys. Well, so Claudia mentioned consistency, and I think that's really important. And Dan brought up a few different places of where they do. So I think where when we used to be pre-platform, we were a lot of A/B testing, and so we would A/B test ads, we would A/B test web content, we'd A/B test our offers, but a lot of them didn't. Well, those things didn't go together. And so if you'd see you'd see an ad for a suite, for example, you'd click through it and you'd end up on the web somewhere with us selling you all of our different rooms. And we sell on a given night, we sell rooms anywhere from $39 to, $1,000, $4,000, right? So what we found is that, really trying to find, if once we know who you are, we know you're a suite buyer, all the ads you see should be about suites. When you land on the web, it should be about suites. If you land on the web after you've already booked your stay, it should be about selling you the rest of your stay, not about selling you a room again, right? So we've tried to really make it clear as you're going through your process, wherever you are in that booking journey, whatever we learned, we try to make sure that everything that you see from that point forward will be based on what we've learned about you from the past. And let me give you a couple really, really specific results that are just things that I find, when my team first brought them to me, I kind of chuckled because, again, we used to A/B test. Last summer, we A/B tested a lot of different things. And what we found was that by far, pool creative for Vegas sold Vegas better than anything else we could sell or anything else we could show. We could show entertainers, we could show food, we could show the rooms, but show people in a pool having a good time, people book and they come. And I'm sure Claudia sees this with Margaritaville too. However, what we found this year as we went a little further is we started to personalize, and we said, okay, to try to get people to come to Vegas, for people from Chicago and New York, places like that where you have to fly, we'll show you the pool creative because we know that's our winner. For people from California, Arizona, places where you can actually drive, we'd show people in a car on a road trip. And if you think of like the Hangover scene when you're coming over the mountain, you can see Vegas for the first time. It's a pretty exciting scene. So we basically recreated that scene, and we saw double-digit lift in conversion by showing Arizona and California people them in a road trip car versus showing pool. And then we went a step further, and I mean, this is, again, it seems really silly, but we customized the license plate so California people got California cars and Arizona people get Arizona cars, and you saw another couple points of improvement in conversion. And so the idea that just, little things, for whatever reason, trigger emotions in guests to make them make the purchase decisions that you want, it's been very exciting for us. And we've done the same. We've seen the same thing on former suite buyers, former mid-level hotel room buyers, former price shoppers, of showing them the right creative. In the past, we've always led with Caesars because what we found is you get a lot of people will come in on the idea of Caesars, find it's too expensive, and trickle down to one of our other properties, and that works well. Whereas like a Caesars guest will never click on a Flamingo or a Link ad and go buy Caesars. And so we had always defaulted to Caesars. What we found now is that by showing the guest, whether it's if we know the property, then that's the winner. But if we just know that in general, are they a low, medium, or high spender, we can show them creative in our ads, in our search results, in our social ads, et cetera, that match what they've done historically or what they've shown propensity to do. We see significantly better conversion. Again, it doesn't sound like rocket science, but to actually do that at scale is not easy. And again, we've worked with our partners a lot to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. When if you say that to someone who isn't really involved in marketing efforts, it doesn't sound like rocket science. But getting that on the scale needed to market to an entire continent of people, that does take a lot of work and some very sophisticated systems. I think that level of granularity is critical if we are to progress as an industry. And with personalization, when it comes to the license plates on a car in a creative that you're using, it really does need to be that granular to see those conversions and see those returns.
Yeah, Caesars, one thing, if we're good at one thing, it's analytics and measurement. That's been our core, and so that's been an area where, we measure everything, sometimes to a fault, but we know the impact of every change that we make.
Absolutely. I think Caesars has got a great reputation for that, and across the casino industry, the wider casino industry, when it comes down to analytics and measurement, the reputation is definitely the envy of the travel industry there.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
So Claudia, I wanted to ask you about other systems. How are other systems contributing to the personalization parameters for Margaritaville?
I should have thought about that question a little better. There's a lot of systems that ultimately contribute to the entire experience in a guest lifetime, right? Whether, again, and I kind of went a little bit over the different types of consumers that we have and the different types of customers that we service. So for us, really, it's not just the property management system and the website browsers or the cookies or, kind of like our digital tracking of a consumer, if you would, or even the loyalty or the local spend on property. A lot of the systems that contribute to the personalization actually do come from the data that we get from third parties. So we do have agreements with third-party data providers that allow us to know when a customer, for example, that has been a lifetime Margaritaville fan has reached the age of retirement, and we can approach them for a home, or it's telling us that someone who's been a customer of Margaritaville for the last 26 years has a child that is now going on college for whatever school in the United States or even internationally, and we can send them a message about Margaritaville University. So we have a chain of systems that provide us data that is not just relevant to purchases or preferences, but also in a way life events that are not necessarily birthdays or anniversaries, but maybe bigger events, because the very high likelihood is that we will have a product for that event, whether it's you're retiring into a Margaritaville retirement community, or you're sending your kids to college, and we can make them brand ambassadors from when they're 18. So.
Yeah, interesting. I think as part of what you've just explained there, Claudia, we have, it sounds like you guys down at Margaritaville are very, very good at working on that customer lifetime value, whereby you basically capitalize on the customer's need for experiences throughout their entire lifetime.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So one of the things one of the data sources that we have access to, for example, is the concert ticket data from like Ticketmasters, from Jimmy's concerts, Jimmy Buffett, from years and years of concerts, right? So we know sometimes, for example, that one particular customer has been to 45 concerts, right? So we know this person is going to go see Jimmy play if it's coming to Ohio. And we know that also this person lives in a specific zip code, and we know that they have visited our website looking for information about the Margaritaville communities. So we kind of tie all those points together, if you would, from different sources, from different places, and from different data points, and create special offers and special communications for those consumers.
Fantastic. So compiling all those different data points and pieces of information to make a highly relevant offer, depending on how they've acted in the past.
Yeah, and it's also actually a little bit of it's almost like a little bit of a scavenger hunt, right? We have to go find sometimes the data points that are more relevant or more helpful for the type of offer that we're trying to put together. Obviously, all the properties also have their own dimensions of personalization when they send offers. So we have different offers and templates and campaigns that are driven to people who are prone to go to the spa or have been to our spas, or people who like to try our wave rider in the surfing kind of training machine that we have in some of our properties. So we know those parameters, and those are easier campaigns to put together because we have them registered. They have given us their information, and we know what they like. It's finding those little gems in the data that I get most excited about, and it's just kind of identifying that consumer that's ready to make that next Margaritaville engagement and make it in a big way. So.
Yes, certainly, and I think you've raised a very astute point there, Claudia, in that it's not always about data volume. It's often about data relevance as well, and finding that unique piece of data that allows you to make that decision that will win the sale or win the conversion.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, we've talked quite a bit here in the context of Margaritaville about those in their 50s and 60s. Dan, with the rise of millennials and Gen Z travelers, how are you adjusting your business to their needs, especially around personalization?
Yeah, thanks, Leo. So it's very interesting to hear what both Michael and Claudia are each doing. I think the one thing for us, given the scale of our business and the number of brands that we have, is the lifetime customer value and making sure that we are taking someone from college or university in a Bus About or Kentucky experience well into retirement with like Uniworld or Insight, and keeping them across that journey and kind of bridging that gap, especially between 35 and 50, where people tend to stop traveling when they're having kids and buying their first homes and focused on other priorities, and trying to make sure that we bring them back and into the consideration set after Kentucky 18 to 35 and Trafalgar 40, 50 plus. And so what's really interesting for us is that the marketing and techniques and the ways that we were connecting with travelers that were baby boomers and even really kind of Gen Z travelers, now there's a big difference between those two in their expectations for personalization, but also just immediacy. I think that's one of the big shifts that we have seen, where it might have been acceptable before for someone to request a quote with us, for someone to reach out on the phone and be able to then follow up and then help them with a very high ticket value, and therefore provide the hand-holding required to give them the details and flights and so forth. With the younger millennial and Gen Z traveler, it is incredibly fast, and the expectations are more pressing than ever for us just to be able to text them rather than call them, right? Like it's the reaction that I think most of us have, like, you're calling me? Are you going to leave a voicemail next? And so the expectation is that you just want rapid fire communication to be able to make a decision. And so with Kentucky in particular, which is our large global youth brand, is making sure that we can respond to any of their requests immediately utilizing text and be able to answer any quick questions they have, introducing the tools that are familiar to most people here on the call with live chat, but the expectations for them about being able to get immediate answers to their questions and be able to make decisions on the fly. And even the way that we're bringing them into the consideration. I think this is like a big difference where an older traveler, someone at least 40 plus, would be typically using search. And so they're intent-based. They know that they want to go to a specific destination. They decide they want to go to Europe. They want to do a tour. They're searching for keywords that are associated with that. We can put our product in front of them and hope to connect with them. But the millennial traveler is very focused on social, and their inspiration primarily comes from seeing other people's posts. And so the interesting thing about that is that when someone actually clicks through on a social advertisement versus search, it needs to be quite a different experience, because now you're educating them on the brand, the USPs, and making sure that they understand the whole experience they could have, and then also giving them immediate opportunities to book that. I mean, we see conversion rates on social advertising convert twice as high as those with search. So there's an interesting opportunity for us, like with Bus About, U River Cruises, and Kentucky, that are totally youth-focused, and this is a major concentration for me in our business, because we want to make sure that next generation of travelers are coming into the consideration set and booking our brands and taking those travel experiences, and then hopefully we'll continue to earn their business, and they'll come back and travel with many of our brands over the years. So it is a big shift for us, and it's one that we're putting a lot of time and attention and effort into, with the messaging, the marketing, and then having a more youth-focused customer experience.
Yeah, very well said. I think the medium is very important, and to make sure that personalization does perform across all demographics. You don't just need to switch the message to a more age-appropriate one, but the medium also needs to be adjusted to. And with millennials and Gen Zs, as we all know, this comes down to social media, and this also comes down to, as you said many times there, Dan, the immediacy and the urgency of it. You know, they are very intent-based searchers. They like to do things on the fly, and you do have to account for that to increase those sales and increase those levels of loyalty amongst your target groups.
Yeah, definitely, Leo. And I think if anyone here on the call wants to take a look, just for contrast, between Trafalgar, which is our largest brand in the group, and have a look at Trafalgar.com and how we message and communicate, which is very reviews-focused, similar to Uniworld. So you'll see a lot of the reviews on the travel experiences themselves, very content-heavy. And if you then look at Busabout, our entire Busabout approach is all user-generated content. So you'll have maps that will show you where people are at this particular moment. You'll see these amazing images, and the whole concept there is just to encourage people to explore, see places that they would want to go, and use that imagery to connect with the destination, and then discover what trip that is that they're on. And so it is exciting. I mean, obviously, I love this space. I love travel. I love digital. So it always intrigues me to see the results of this activity and metrics and performance. But I think that's probably the greatest contrast you can look at today. And then you got to think about what does that mean, 5 or 10 years from now. So how do we make sure that each of our brands are relevant for their audience? So we spend a lot of time with our digital game plans looking at who is it that we're talking to and then how best to reach them. Because it does come back to that. Like, what are we trying to achieve? What is our marketing strategy? And then how does digital personalization tie into that? And so to make sure that we're relevant on the right channels, like the right social channels that are going to be able to connect with those prospective travelers. And so it is an interesting challenge for most businesses today. And I think that there's a lot of focus on this because many companies are struggling to connect with that next generation traveler and to kind of make that next leap, whether that's like a crossing the chasm type scenario where it's like, there's all of these upstart brands that are direct to consumer that are filling a need, and they're realizing a major opportunity that more established brands, very focused on the way that they've conducted their business for a long period of time, and they're wondering where that business has gone. And so for us, we're incredibly focused on making sure that we remain relevant, and we are having a good deal of success, but there's things that we are testing and trialing now that will hopefully ensure that we're even more successful. With Kentucky USA, for example, it's our largest opportunity, and that's a big focus for myself being based here in Los Angeles and overseeing Kentucky USA, is to make sure that we successfully grow that brand and make sure that we connect with American travelers, the next generation of American travelers, and send them traveling all over the world with Kentucky. And so the shifts will still continue, and I look forward to continuing to sharing those. I know we'll be together in October, and so this is kind of a prelude to further discussions, and I'll make sure that I bring some other insights for that then.
Yeah, no, that would be fantastic there, Dan. And I think this is a good moment to actually mention the event in October. Basically, it is taking place on October 28th and 29th at the Hyatt Regency in Chicago. The subject of personalization for both professionals in revenue management, digital, distribution and marketing will be taking center stage. For anyone who's listening in, all the panelists today will be joining us, as well as some of the most senior speaker lineup we've had in years. So we'll have C-suite speakers from Hilton, Marriott, Preferred Hotels, and CIE Tours taking the stage, to name a few there. So it is an unmissable show for anyone in RM, marketing, or distribution looking to increase their direct booking, their loyalty, and their personalized experiences effort. So definitely one not to miss. It seems that time is running short, so we probably have time for just one more question from each speaker. So I'll switch back to Michael. So when it comes to personalization, what are your major goals over the next year going forward for 2020?
Deeper integration, right? So I mentioned we have these two systems. Our two partners don't talk to each other well right now. So we do a good job on our legacy customers and understanding what they need and getting the right offer to them at the right time. We are learning a lot on our the people that are new to our business and trying to drive them into our business the first time, and hopefully convert them to a regular. But we haven't done a great job at connecting those two platforms yet, so that we can personalize the digital experience for the legacy customer and try to find them if we haven't seen them in a while and things like that. So really just trying to marry what I would call our loyalty database with we call them free independent traveler database. If we could try to take some of the things we learned in loyalty and apply them to the free independent traveler, we'll do really well. And then if we treat the free independent traveler like a loyalty customer, in some cases, I think we'll see good upside.
Wonderful, great. And Claudia, on your side with Margaritaville, going forward for 2020, how is Margaritaville going to be approaching personalization?
Well, we're launching a loyalty program that is mostly based on personalization. So, we're kind of breaking a few rules with the traditional loyalty programs out there. It's not public, so it'll I hope it still be a surprise for all the listeners. And so we're working very hard on that. But I think Michael just kind of hit it in the nail. Connectivity is probably the biggest challenge that we have moving forward, and the more we rely on providers and technology platforms that specialize and do something, one thing very well, the more difficult it is to associate it with all the other systems that have to work together. So that to me is one of the priorities is selecting systems and selecting vendors and partners that work with us that work in very integrated platforms and allow us to extract data in a way that can be consumable and actually usable. Otherwise, it's just data for the sake of data.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're in agreement there from what you and Michael are saying. The issue is integration and making personalization seamless. That's a tricky task.
Yeah, right now it's definitely a task of many people. So obviously, efficiencies and connectivity can help in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And on that topic of data utilization that you guys have raised, I wanted to finalize with the ending question for Dan. Are there any suggestions you have from the travel corporations on how travel companies can better utilize data to improve their marketing efforts?
Yeah, for sure, Leo, I think it's a good point to end off with. I think the one thing that we had identified, we just had our digital summit last week. We had all of our global team members come in from Sydney and from Cape Town, Toronto, and across the U.S., and we had 5 days together, and we had multiple different partners present, and the one theme that it came back to is first-party data. There are so many opportunities for each of our brands and businesses to benefit from the first-party data that we have access to be able to better smart identify and target market to find exactly who it is we need to talk to. Everyone's trying to prospect and find new customers or trying to retarget to existing customers, get them to come back, and utilizing all these different techniques and looking at different advertising platforms. And the one thing it came back to for us is all the other elements of first-party data that you actually can leverage in your business today to make sure that you are incredibly targeted with your marketing efforts. And so that's a major theme for us, and I think hopefully that resonates with a number of people on the call, because I think if you take stock of all the first-party data that you have access to, I'm pretty sure that most people here on the call would recognize there's an opportunity that you're not yet realizing to be able to bring in some of that first-party data, whether it be the newsletter list that you have for social advertising as one example of first-party data. But if you're advertising on a site like TravelZoo, that's and then you can use your first-party data to get a better sense of who those customers actually are. And so the big theme for us, Leo, and hopefully as a benefit for everyone else, is looking at every opportunity to benefit from your first-party data.
Absolutely. Fantastic, Dan. Well, that's some great input from the three of you there. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end the webinar now as we come to the end of our time slot. But it's been a fantastic conversation, some very diverse and interesting opinions from some extremely unique brands here. So as I said before on the call, keep your eyes out for updates on i4Travel North America. Once again, we'll be talking about all the different types and applications of personalization from the entire North American travel industry. Thank you again to the panelists for your fantastic contributions, and stay tuned.
Most welcome, Leo. Thanks, everyone. See you in October.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye.